They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. This is hour number 2, and I believe this is week 10, I think we're at this point.
Week 11.
Week 11, you're right. I missed a week. Week 11. And we're going strong, obviously. We're doing pretty good since I can't keep track of weeks. We've been plowing through. You can follow us along on the iHeartRadio podcasting app. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Instagram, what am I missing? Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you can find the Benchwarmerz. The Benchwarmerz podcast at yahoo.com, Benchwarmerz with a Z if you want to get in touch with us. At the end of this hour, we're going to be talking we're going to run through our playoff teams for the AFC, NFC, and tell you who's going to go to the Super Bowl, and then tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl, in theory. We might be right. But first, Jose, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit of NBA, because this week we saw Kyrie Irving kind of come out with yet another one of his very unique takes on things. And to paraphrase, you can look up the entire quote, but basically I'll paraphrase. And Kyrie Irving basically said that the NBA should not have a season because he believes that it's going to distract, the NBA season is going to distract the country from the Black Lives Matter movement. And right off the bat, Jose, I want your take before anything about just to not debate the question or anything, but I think that this is a good message in theory, but I think it's probably the worst messenger to provide us with this message.
The idea, first of all, just to address what he actually said, though, the idea that I can't be concerned about the Black Lives Matter movement, potentially participate in protests, however you're supporting the movement, that you can't do that while also enjoying basketball, it's just ridiculous to me. It doesn't make any sense. So basically what he's saying, what he's suggesting by that thought is if there had been no coronavirus and we're all playing sports and then the killing of George Floyd happened, would all sports have just been shut down until indefinitely?
Yep.
to protest? Because that's basically what he's kind of suggesting. So that part is just completely ridiculous. You can't stop everything to focus on protests. Life has to continue, and people have to have the option to protest at times and watch television at times. I mean, should we just take all television completely off TV? Right? Just no Netflix, no TV, no anything. All you can do is protest. That's kind of what he's suggesting, which is, once again, completely ridiculous. But then, coming from him, and I'm not even going to get into him being a flat earther or anything like that, but coming from him, he's injured, he can't participate, and he can't attend the games.
Right.
He literally has, to me, he has no right to even say anything. He has literally nothing to lose if the season doesn't continue, and you just wait till 2021, whenever the next season is going to start. He has literally nothing to lose. So I just don't think he's a good person to be talking about what people should be doing for the rest of this season.
So here's my first. I had two thoughts right off the bat when I saw this from Kyrie. Three thoughts. The first was, isn't that the flat Earth guy? Why is he trying to be this like meta pseudo philosophical? I feel like Kyrie thinks that he's a deep thinker, but he's still in kind of like the kiddie pool when it comes to thoughts. His thoughts aren't well thought out, ironically. And so that was first. Secondly, it feels a little, like you just said, like because Kyrie's hurt and the Nets aren't going to be in the playoffs. And
well, the Nets are in the playoffs. He's just not in the playoffs.
He's not in the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Nets will be in the playoffs, but they're not going to do anything in the playoffs. So essentially, they'll be out immediately, is what I was sort of alluding to. But the the second thought I had was that this is Kyrie Irving, who is now saying he's anti NBA season. Juxtapose that with LeBron James, who is all about having a season, and it feels like there's still some like sour grapes there, because I think deep down, I think Kyrie thinks that he is on the same level as LeBron, and I think that he knows enough and he's smart enough to realize that if LeBron gets another title, it's just going to put that much more of a chasm between the two of them. So I think there's a little, I feel like his motivations might be a little bit biased, let's say. And then the last thing is it me? So if I'm a star NBA player and I want to protest whatever you want. You want to protest anything. You want to protest for Black Lives Matter. You want to protest water conservation. You want to protest I don't know, animal killing, fur, whatever, PETA, whatever. Pick your protest, okay? Isn't the best place to protest where you get the most views? Don't you want people to see you and your message? And don't want more people watch you on TV? So if let's say you're kneeling for the anthem, people are going to see that. So you're putting the protest in the game. So even if they're trying to be distracted by the NBA, they're seeing people protest during NBA games. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah. I will.
It's crazy to me.
I've heard. Just to play devil's advocate, I've heard some argue that things like that haven't worked in the past. Wearing T-shirts that say "I can't breathe" or whatever, wristbands that say Black Lives Matter, whatever the case, whatever you would do, these kind of these passive forms of protesting, where you're protesting by wearing something, or something like that. The rebuttal I've heard is that those don't work. They don't do anything, and we have a unique moment that we need to take advantage of. That's the one thing I've heard that does make some sense. I still don't buy it. But because I don't think you're going to make change by stopping everything and just focusing on the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't think that's going to happen anyway. So,
but Colin Kaepernick started this whole thing by kneeling during the anthem. So I agree that wearing things doesn't really mean much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't think the TV networks are going to tune in because they know we're going to be watching to see who's kneeling and who isn't. I mean, if they're kneeling, that's an active protest during the game, and especially if it's both teams and it's unified. I mean, think of the power that would have.
Well, the NBA doesn't really do, if I remember correctly, the NBA doesn't do the national anthem, and I'm not saying that the eyeballs wouldn't be there. The eyeballs would see, you would see, people wearing whatever and doing the kneeling. I'm just throwing out the thought that perhaps players would just then be focused on playing the game and not necessarily protesting, and maybe that's what the concern is brought up by Kyrie Irving and some other players. To be fair, there are other players that are on his side as well.
Yeah,
somehow by playing, you wouldn't be able to put your full energy into protesting.
Yeah, I think you could put your full energy into protesting right before the game starts, and then put the rest of your energy into the game. And then post-game press conferences. You don't think that you don't think you could throw that into a question or two and be like, yeah, before I answer that question, I just want to say, make sure everyone realizes that Black Lives Matter.
And that's what I completely agree with you, and that's why Colin Kaepernick was protesting when he was protesting, right? Because he wanted the most eyeballs on him. So why wouldn't you protest during the game when people are watching?
Right.
So, absolutely.
I did have a question about that. So Colin Kaepernick, because Colin Kaepernick is sort of this weird figure in the NFL, in the history, in the annals of NFL. And full disclosure, I took some time out of my week to go back, and I went back and watched 2 games because I wanted to introduce myself to Colin Kaepernick's actual playing and just see if my memory stood up to what I thought he was. And I watched the game against the Packers when he just decimated them with his legs, and he ran all over them. Like, it was, I think the only person who ran more of the Packers was Raheem Mostert during the season last year. And then I watched the Super Bowl, the Harbaugh Bowl, with the Ravens and the 49ers and Colin Kaepernick. And in that game, I mean, I guess I don't have to tell you this as a 49ers fan, but that game came down to the very last play of the game. And Kaepernick, I mean, he has or had, you know, an arm that was, his arm strength is otherworldly. I mean, I would love to see what his fastball pitch would be in baseball. It's got to be mid-90s. I mean, he was just whizzing balls to receivers. And I was thinking, what if Colin Kaepernick had won that Super Bowl? What if the 49ers had won that Super Bowl? If Colin Kaepernick had a ring and he was a Super Bowl champion and where he is now, do you think that we would look at him or the whole situation differently because he was a backup quarterback kneeling at the time? And that sort of that rubbed people the wrong way. But I was wondering if, you know, if giving him a ring would change our view on him.
That's a good question. I do think that maybe it would have had a difference somehow. I don't think that people would receive the protest any differently, but the narrative that he's not in the NFL because he's not good enough,
right,
that it would have been tough to sell that narrative.
To see it as anything but blackball.
Yeah, because if he was, you know, he's obviously you're a Super Bowl champion, you're a great player. Well, at least that's the way it's always kind of tied together. So they would say, oh, well, obviously he's a Super Bowl winner. Don't let it have been with Super Bowl MVP as well. Right. Well, then all of a sudden he has a little bit more clout. So, I do think from that standpoint he would have been able to say, hey, I'm definitely being blackballed. I'm a Super Bowl champion.
That led me from – so I was that was this whole train of thought I got because I saw the Kyrie Irving quotes. And then I started thinking about Colin Kaepernick getting a ring, but then I went back to the NBA and I started thinking about – you know, championship rings and things, and sort of it alludes to kind of the Jordan documentary like we touched on a few weeks ago. So here's my question to you, and it's two parts. Which current NBA player would benefit the most, you know, in terms of a career perspective by getting a championship ring? Theoretically, I mean, their first championship ring.
Their first championship ring, okay. Yep. Okay, well, you said first.
Unless you think there's a player who would get a second or third, and that would propel them even further.
I actually think the person who would benefit the most from getting a ring is LeBron James, because 4 rings strengthens his case, brings him closer to Kobe Bryant, who has 5, ties him with Shaq. Like 4 rings, I think that puts him past Larry Bird, brings them within 1 of Magic Johnson. I think it kind of just strengthens his case. As far as who has the most to gain from just winning their first ring, I struggle to go. I went back and forth between James Harden and Russell Westbrook. I think James Harden. I feel like Russell Westbrook's kind of gotten labeled as a player who's not a winning type of player, especially with Kevin Durant leaving the team. He's kind of just gotten a bad reputation. And then you saw he had the first round exit a few years ago against the Utah Jazz in a series that they would have expected to win. He's just kind of gotten a rap as not being a championship level player, and I think that maybe if he were to get a ring, it would elevate him into a new class. Another person I thought of just as a younger player is Jason Tatum, because, you know, if Giannis wins, we already know he was one of the best players in the game, so he wins, okay, fine, he's the best. If the Boston Celtics win a championship and Jason Tatum is the reason why, I think that kind of elevates him into a new class of NBA star.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I think the LeBron thing is interesting. I didn't think of it in those terms, but you might be right. The first person that came to mind for me was James Harden, because he is known for this offensive. I mean, thankfully all the rhetoric is stopped with James Harden is the best offensive player in the history of the NFL. After the Jordan documentary, everybody shut up with that because it's ridiculous. But I feel like James Harden is known. He's a stat machine in the regular season, and it's sort of interesting because he sort of burns out by the end of the season, it seems like. And I'm actually very curious if this season starts to see in a consolidated season if James Harden can be able to keep up that level of intensity that he has and put up 50 shots a game to see if he can make some noise and not run out of steam. But I think with a ring, it sort of validates a lot of the rhetoric and it makes it a little more legitimate. And it's not just him just putting up 37 points a game and then falling flat in his face. If he makes it to the end, and I feel like people forget they were within one game. They were within a bad hamstring of Chris Paul. I could not think of his name. I was like thinking Chris, some other Chris, but Chris Paul's hamstring. They were within a hamstring pull of Chris Paul beating the Warriors, and they just narrowly missed it. And I feel like he would be the best. He would benefit the most. He'd be the beneficiary of winning a ring. So,
well, you just reminded me of someone who actually is I think might be the answer to this question. Mike D'Antoni is the person who needs a ring more than anyone.
That's fair. That's actually pretty fair. So that led me to think then, in terms of all time, because then everything leads back to Michael Jordan. But we see all the players that Michael Jordan took rings away from. And even with the Rockets in 94, 95, there's still like this pseudo asterisk around them where it's like the first thing anybody says after somebody says, Hakeem Olajuwon has 2 rings, the first thing anybody says is, yeah, but that Jordan wasn't in the league. Jordan was out those years.
Yeah.
And so I was curious to see who you thought all time would benefit the most from just a single championship ring.
I went back and forth between a lot of guys. I picked Charles Barkley, just because, one, he always gets made fun of by Shaquille O'Neal on TV. Every time they have the Inside the NBA, whatever it's called, Shaq just goes in on Barkley. Oh, you ain't got no championships. What do you know about winning rings? And I feel like I just want Charles to have a championship so he can have some. Because Kenny the Jet Smith, who wasn't even half the player that Charles Barkley was, can just sit there and laugh and smile because he's got 2 championship rings. But Barkley has to sit there and take it. So Barkley was the guy I picked. With Donald Winton the Ewing, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I struggled with this, and I think my answer actually is Patrick Ewing because he I thought about Karl Malone, but then you have to think about Karl Malone, then it's John Stockton. And I realized what actually set me against Karl Malone was when he went to that fake Dream Team Lakers with Gary Payton and I forget. There was like so many random people.
Gary Payton, Shaq, Kobe.
Yeah, and it was just a ring grab at that point. And I felt like even if they had won that, I don't think I would have looked at Karl Malone much differently because I would have just kind of thought, yeah, but he kind of it's
a tag-along championship.
Yeah, and then John Stockton, but then John Stockton's place in history is pretty cemented.
Yeah.
So Patrick Ewing, I feel like would benefit the most because Patrick Ewing goes pretty unsung, and if you forget, I mean, even his collegiate career, he was unbelievable, and still lost to Michael Jordan even in college. And I feel like he would benefit greatly. I think his career would be legitimized a little bit more with a single ring. But
yeah, it's hard to argue against Patrick Ewing. Yeah, a great player, and a ring would definitely elevate him because he's kind of in that tier below. Like if you look at like Olajuwon, Shaq, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he's kind of in that really almost like on the third tier. Really, when you consider him against all those other centers. So yeah, a ring would elevate him definitely.
I mean, if Michael Jordan had 7 rings, I mean, would we look at him any different?
No.
Not really, right?
No.
I mean, it would just be one more slap in the face to the rest of NBA history. But all right, so we have to take a break. But going from NBA rings to NFL rings, we're going to talk to you and tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl this coming season in our theoretical season that we've played out. We're going to play out our wild card rounds, divisional round, championship, Super Bowls, and we'll be doing that next. Follow us along at the iHeartRadio podcasting app, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere and anywhere you can find us, the Benchwarmerz podcast. So with that, we'll be right back with some more NFL talk on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
A social distancing tip.
While the CDC urges you to avoid close contact, like hugging or shaking hands, there are other non-physical ways to say hello. Wave, wink, use sign language, salute, smile, give the peace sign, throw up an air high five, do jazz hands. Remember, stay a minimum of 6 feet or 2 arms length away from others and stay home if you can. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Now available on iHeartRadio and Spotify. This is the Benchwarmers Podcast. Here's Lou and Jose.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou, that's Jose, and you are still listening to the Benchwarmers Podcast. We are rolling out hour number 2. This is rounding out hour number 2. We touched on some NBA. We went through breaking news this week. We talked a lot of football in the first hour. We went through our playoff divisions winners and then wild card winners, or not wild card winners, but wild card rankings. We are now going to run through each conference and tell you who is going to end up in Super Bowl 55 in Tampa Bay. So, Jose, I will let you do the honors. If you'd like to start with the AFC or NFC, I care not. I will do the other one, but just tell me, run through real quick who you're, just give the name, the name of the team and the ranking and who wins, and then just kind of blow through it till you get to the Super Bowl.
So the NFC, I have a lot of chalk as far as my selections. I'm just going to go with the NFC since we started the last show with it. Mm-hmm. So divisional round, number 2 seed 49ers against number 7 seed Atlanta. I have the 49ers advancing. And then number 3 seed Dallas against number 6 seed Arizona. I have Dallas winning, setting up an old school rematch of Dallas against the 49ers in the divisional round. But just to go up into the higher bracket, the wild card round, Minnesota's the 4 seed hosting Seattle, the 5 seed. I have Seattle going on the road, defeating Minnesota, setting up the Saints versus Seattle in the divisional round. Number 1 seed Saints, coming off their bye week, defeat Seattle Seahawks and reach the NFC Championship game. And I have the 49ers defeat the Dallas Cowboys, though it's enough to convince people that Dak is the future and he gets a big deal. Just going to throw that in there. The 49ers advance to the NFC Championship game. And then, since this will be maybe the only time in my entire life that I can predict the 49ers winning Super Bowl or going to the NFC Championship game or winning the NFC, I'm going to take it. I have the 49ers going on the road to New Orleans and reaching the Super Bowl.
Okay. Yeah, we have very similar NFC brackets. I have the Saints, the number 2 Saints, taking on the number 7 Philadelphia Eagles in yet what would be a 4th shocking upset in a row for the Saints. I have Philadelphia beating the Saints because the Saints seem cursed. I'm just playing the odds at this point. Then I have the 3 Dallas Cowboys taking on Tampa Bay Bucks at number 6, and I have Tampa Bay beating Dallas, of course, because Dallas doesn't know how to win in the playoffs. Then moving on, so that sets up a Tampa Bay Philadelphia Tom Brady, not Nick Foles anymore, but Carson Wentz rematch. Moving to the other side of the bracket, or the top of the bracket rather, I also have the Green Bay Packers at number 4 taking on the Seattle Seahawks at number 5. I have the Seahawks winning, and then that does set up the exact same Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers matchup, and I have the San Francisco 49ers winning that as well, which leads us to then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beating the Philadelphia Eagles on the other side, and that sets up a incredible NFC Championship of Tom Brady versus Jimmy Garoppolo in the NFC Championship. And I actually do have the San Francisco 49ers advancing because I feel like the Bucs are going to be good, but they're just going to come up a little short this year because of just, the continuity of the Niners is just so much superior to the Bucs being kind of just thrown together this year. So I have the 49ers making it to the Super Bowl.
All right.
So your AFC, run through the AFC for me.
All right, so in the AFC, I've picked the Kansas City Chiefs as the number 1 seed, so they would get the bye. So basically, I have Buffalo against Baltimore, and so Buffalo is the number 7 seed, Baltimore is the number 2 seed. I have Buffalo winning that. Then I have the Colts as the number 3 seed, facing off against number 6 seed Tennessee Titans, with the Colts winning that. And then I have the Cleveland Browns facing off against New England. New England would be the number 4 seed, with Cleveland being the 5 seed. And in this one, I have Cleveland getting the win, the revenge game against Bill Belichick in New England. Cleveland advances, wins their first playoff game, and I can't remember the last
Exactly.
time, but a very long time. But then promptly loses to Kansas City the next round in the divisional round. As much as I wanted to pick the Colts to beat the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round and have the Colts be this super darling team, I just don't think so. I have the Ravens advancing to the AFC Championship game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think the Ravens end up beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead to get to the Super Bowl, setting up, I believe, the 2014 rematch, Ravens against the 49ers in the Super Bowl.
Nice. So we have kind of some similarities there. The Ravens are my 1 seed. So starting off, I have the Chiefs at the 2 seed playing the Broncos at the 7 seed. And even though that's a divisional game and records go out the window, the Chiefs are going to destroy the Broncos. Then I have the Bills at number 3 playing the Steelers at number 6. And I have the Steelers advancing over the Bills just because I'm not a big believer in the Bills. I think their regular season is going to be better than their postseason.
Mm-hmm.
So that sets up a Chiefs-Steelers divisional round. On the other wild card teams I have are the 4 Texans playing the 5 Colts. I have the Colts beating the Texans for a lot of reasons that you already mentioned. At which point the Ravens, the 1 seed, will come off their bye and play the Colts, and then the Ravens will smash the Colts for exactly what you just said. And the Chiefs beating the Steelers. So then we have the Colts playing the Chiefs winning, the Ravens playing the Steelers, the Chiefs winning, and then the Chiefs, Ravens, and then I actually have the Chiefs beating the Ravens because once again Lamar Jackson is kind of, he's had 2 seasons in a row where he's been sort of just this crazy phenomenon, and then he falls flat in his face when it comes to playoffs. I think the Ravens are a better team, but I think Patrick Mahomes once again is going to be kind of the X factor there. And that sets up a complete rematch of last season. I have the San Francisco 49ers playing the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm sorry to say I have the Kansas City Chiefs winning back-to-back Super Bowls.
Yeah, and it's hard.
So
It's
a 49ers fan.
listen. It's hard to argue with you picking them. I have, like I said, this might be the only chance I ever have to pick the 49ers to win the Super Bowl and not look like an idiot. So I'm taking the 49ers, going all the way. I have a chance to be a homer. I'm going to do it. I have really not a lot of issues with your brackets. The only thing is you're just much higher on Tampa Bay than I am. In NFC Championship game, I mean that's. I think they'll be lucky to compete for a playoff spot. I don't see them making a run to the NFC Championship game. Certainly not in year 1. Maybe next season. But
yeah, I mean, in truth, I do feel kind of sheepish picking the Chiefs. I mean, that sort of just seems like the obvious choice. But then, I mean, that's sort of like picking the Patriots over the last 20 years. It's like, well, you're probably going to be right if you pick the team that is going to win. But I think the Bucks. I don't want to get on the Tom Brady hype train too much, but I think that the Bucks sort of benefit from just sort of a lucky break in the playoffs more so than maybe them being the better team. I think just the way the bracket breaks for them sort of sets them up as sort of a, I don't want to say Cinderella team because there are expectations there, but I think they'll go farther than a lot of people may expect them to in their first year of this iteration of the Bucks.
Okay.
Yeah. So that should be interesting. And once again, we do reserve the right to revisit all of this at least once before the regular season starts in about 2 months, just in the event that there's any major injuries or coronavirus outbreaks or who knows what. We get to tweak it one time, but that's it. And we're going to keep all this in writing so we can look back on it and either applaud ourselves or laugh at each other for these picks. So that'll do it, Jose. Well done. Another week in the books. And we'll be back at the same time, same channel, come next week. You can find us once again on the iHeartRadio podcasting app, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, we're there. So for Jose Ortiz, I'm Lou Ruggieri. This has been the Benchwarmerz podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.